All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, we're about to get started, and with the demo of the fast phobia technique. And I use phobia. In some circles, they would say a removing fear technique because supposedly they say phobia is a psychologically protected term. Personally, I don't think that, but then I also have to caveat with that. I'm also a psychologist and a nationally certified alcohol and drug counselor, so it might be a little bit different. So when you look at phobias, and fears in general, there's some cool information, right? Uh, about that, right? Which is it shows how quickly your brain works and how it transcends through time and all the changes that can happen with it. There's my little Darth Vader pumpkin behind me. So rather than it's necessarily a bad thing, it's a good thing. A lot of us have these fears and phobias as a survival mechanism. That's why they're in your head, right? And now we do know somewhat there are you actually get some of these things passed down through your genetic code, right? There was a cool study, this will all tie together. There was a cool study done, and Billy would probably know about, where they took rats, and rats like, I can't think of the name of it, but it's like a fruit syrupy thing. So, of course, they go, because they love that. So they would eat it. But every time they'd feed them that, they would shock them, till finally they could put it right in front of them and the rats wouldn't eat it, right? Even sometimes then just putting it in front of them, they would have their brain would light up in a fear response and they would go into what we would call a phobic response or a fear response and try to hide um, with no shock. But the interesting thing was children and grandchildren of those rats had that fear, even though they were never like exposed to the shock with that thing that genetically they should want, the fruit, right? The sweetness, the fructose, whatever it was that got them, that they would like. So that lets you know some of this is put into your head, right? And it's survival. Of course, the classic ones they would talk about is spiders, snakes, and darkness, right? Spiders, snakes, and darkness. Why do people have fears of those? Well, humans, by nature and our eyes, do not work well at night. So, genetically, it was good to have some fear at night. That's why you hunkered down in your teepee or your cave or your dwelling if you could, right? Because you couldn't see this stuff that could kill you. And that is also true with spiders and snakes, depending on in a lot of the world where I live, there's a lot of shit down here that can kill you, right? Um, the several types of spiders. This is why your brain doesn't differentiate between, like, down here you got brown recluse. They're real big and they spidery looking, right? But they don't really bother you. In fact, they're great. They eat bad spiders and stuff, right? We got a couple at the barn, one, and you see them, but it gives you that little bit of a, response. Because again, your brain doesn't know the difference between that, a black widow, a brown recluse, all these different kinds of spiders, depending where you're at, that could kill you. And the same with snakes. You see a snake, you know. Um, so a natural fear of it, right, is that. So anyway, but these things were put into your head to keep you to survive, which may or may not be a bad thing. Where it becomes a bad thing, or I don't like to use term bad or good, it doesn't serve you well, right? It does not serve you well, right? If you get a phobic response of having a relationship with somebody, of committing and doing that, it may not serve you well long term, right? So we think of the big, and down here in Florida, one of the big phobias I see that when I had my clinic open, especially, is at least a couple times a month I'd get a phone call um, about, can you help me? I got a fear of driving over bridges. I got a fear of driving over bridges. I had a brain skip there, right? Neuron misfire, which happens a lot, TBIs. But tough crowd. Anyway, so because I live in part of Florida that like to get into Tampa, you got to go over the sky we call Skyway Bridge. It's a huge bridge. I think it's 200 something feet above the water, so ships can go underneath it. And then of course they always point out it was the bridge that collapsed in 1979. A barge hit it, the bridge collapsed. Somewhere between 30 and 70 people died, because their cars would just drive over the edge and all that. So, so if that's in your thing and you know that, you know, uh, there's also a thing in your eyes that when you're going over a bridge, especially a high bridge, you lose sight of firm ground. It kind of makes sense. So that might get you a little bit of this or that, right? And again, it's all personal. Everybody's different, but and so I would get people call me up that would want to work on it. And I'd say, well, generally, I don't care why you want to change, but I'd say, well, but why do you want to change now? And they go, well, I got to fly once or twice a month, and I got to fly out of Tampa. And if I don't take that route, it adds 2 hours of travel time circling around to come back into the thing. So yeah, so it was fun, and also fear of heights. A lot of people have fear of heights. Uh, Again, some of it's just the way your brain's processing information in your eyes. But you create that fear. And the difference between like a fear response is it's like you don't want it. But a true phobic response, if you've ever had a phobic response, right, it shuts you down, right? Because you skip fight or flight and you go directly to freeze generally, right? You go directly to freeze. And so that's why it doesn't serve you well. So, and there's some caveats to it that different offshoots. We came up with a technique. It came up through NFNLP, which is called the mending a broken heart technique. A lot of people, when they get a broken heart, right, they have a fear response of going into the next relationship, right? And it's just an offshoot of what we're going to do today. So you could do a general, phobia technique. And what it is the fact that what happens is you get let me see, pull it up. You get um, some kind of external cue or external behavior comes in and it sets off these different things. Can you see my screen with the little circle? With the external, it says behavior, but it could be stimulus, comes into your eyes, your ears, whatever, it sets it off, and it starts your internal processes, right? You may start thinking about it, which will change your mood. You realize you're coming up on the bridge because you see it coming up. And so that sets off the internal process of you start the panic attack. You start feeling the tightness in your chest, which changes your mood. And so the internal process is a physical process. The internal mood is more of a mental, but they they complement each other. They build on each other. I read a thing where an exercise physiologist said he had a study where it shows that like when you're working out, right, that if you get negative images or words in your head about the workout, it will stop you from pushing yourself. Right? So it's like even something like they use the example guys lifting weights, let's use that, right? Or running and you're getting to that limit, like, oh, it's starting to hurt. If you have the internal dialogue of this sucks or it hurts, it will shut down. It does this process here where it begins to do that. And it's really hard to push through that, right? And so, and then what happens with the phobic response is something's happening, you start feeling it, and it shuts down your ability to override it, right? Um, and again, that's why you see high performers, uh, they rarely use the negative words to motivate themselves, right? And was thinking of I think it was a football game, but it was a close game. But the team that usually went, I think it was going back the best example I have. If you're not a football fan, bear with me. It was a few Super Bowls ago where the Patriots were still the dominant team and they lost. Right? Okay, fine. Right? Finally, one good thing, Coach Belichick didn't say, "Well, they cheated because we could only lose if they cheat." But that's a different story. But uh, but all of them, Brady, I can never pronounce it, Variable, whatever. He's now a coach. All these really, they're all in the Hall of Fame. They're great that, and even the coach, you could see it as soon as the game was over. As they couldn't believe they lost. It took a moment for them to set in. They were like just that, which is a different response. So they didn't have that. Oh my God, we might lose, as opposed to there was a Super Bowl a few years ago, around that time. But the Patriots were losing 25-3. The games or 28-3. They were down by 25. Everybody said the game's over. Yada yada yada. And then they scored. The Patriots scored. It was against the Falcons, right? And and as soon as they scored, you could see the sideline on the other team, the Falcons, change. And from what I know now, it's like they started the internal dialogue. You know, are we going to choke? Is Tom Brady going to do it again? Right? And then they made mistakes, just mistakes. The other day there was the only sport I watch is football and MMA. You could see the mental mistakes, right? That it's trackable, I think, to the negative comments, right? So so let's do this, but I want to spin it to business. So how can you apply this to business? Well, it might be that you have some phobic responses to certain things and fears that stops you from learning new material, stops you implementing new things. Because what'll happen, you start doing that and it starts that cycle. You get a physical, like, can I do it? This is hard. Well, shit, it should be hard. If you've never done it, it's probably going to be hard, right? Right? You don't know what you don't know. And I'm going to caveat this with the demo I'm going to do is basically based around technology, right? So you're dealing with an entity, technology, that basically is unforgiving, right? If you make a mistake, if you don't put the dot in the right, my wife would tell you back when she would program, she used to actually write code. She put the dot in the wrong place, the backslash in the wrong place. That's it. The whole goddamn program won't work. You got to go fix it because I used to watch her 20 something years ago go through lines of code, right? Um, which is not like how most people operate in the world. Usually there's some wiggle room, right? So that'll stop you. And then you'll start thinking about it, starts that cycle back there where you start thinking about other times you failed, right? And then that brings that memory up, which then it starts that chain where it's going to make it harder and harder and harder, right? But we do know now that when we're doing this, with what we know about memory now, the minute you bring up those memories, they are not hardwired in your brain, right? While you bring them up, they're actually palatable. How you can change them. I speak for a living, but not good today. That was politically incorrect. But so anyway, so you can modify it because you're constantly rewriting memories. Most of us make them worse, right? Make them worse, right? Um, but while you do that, if there's ways we could change it. So I'm going to do the fast phobia technique with someone who volunteered, right? And it has to do with technology, which a lot of us have. When you're trying to add some technology to your business, trying to build your business. You got to build your website or a landing page or all that techno stuff, right? And it depends, especially if you're of a generation that didn't grow up with this technology. I mean, that's a little bit different for us. It's so, but it starts that, and you get into that. And if you have other fears of not being, and sometimes it leads to some fears in our head which can be tied to the fear and the phobia response, especially in this kind of stuff of I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. You know, a big one I've heard some people say is I'm too old, right? Which what does that got to do with learning technology, right? I'm not saying it's easy. It's just this is what, and then because your brain's the response is going on in your midbrain and your deeper brain, right? In your amygdala area. So you're in the fear response, and then it goes into your cortex and looks for memories that'll reinforce this fear is good. This fear will keep me alive, right? Um, so what we want to do is change that a little bit, right? We want to change that a little bit, right? So, Miss Michelle, how are you today?
Peachy Keen Jelly Bean.
Okay. If it's okay, we could do a demo. I kind of drafted you earlier, right? But it's like, so what happens when you start like trying to learn new technology, like uh, a funnel? Heaven forbid you decide you're going to create an app. You know, one of the people on the call is very good at creating apps. I looked at it and go, no, I'll tap out on this one, right? But I, so what happens with you when it starts happening?
I'm very excited at first. I can do it. I can do it. And then as I go through the process or the course, I start to deflate, thinking I can't do it. Or I can, and then I'll try to boost myself again. You can do it. You've done it in the past, but not to this extent. You can do it. You're smart. You've created things, not technology, but you've created other things. And then I deflate. And then it comes time to actually do it. And I spin my wheels because I don't know what's first. What's first? What's first? And then I'll go over here. Is this first? Is this first? Is this first? Oh, maybe I should review my notes. And so I get stuck in the learning cycle that doesn't seem to be helping me.
Okay. And where do you feel that in your body?
Head to toe. Here, I'm gonna go with
Okay.
my brain and my chest and my jaw because I feel like I feel like
Okay.
grr.
And does it bring up any other feelings like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm too old? You know,
Yes, all those. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not wealthy enough. I'm not capable enough. Even though I am capable, but I
and even
just
though, when you start thinking about that with technology, what happens when someone points out that like you do all this Facebook stuff and you create posts and you do this and you do stuff that at one point you were terrified of doing, you know? So you have evidence to the contrary, right?
right.
So what we want to do is go in there and help you rewrite some of those memories in a different way, um, which will get you more motivated to do what you need to do, right? So first thing I want you to do is just take a nice deep breath and give yourself permission, right? That and remind yourself that basically all we're going to do is remove the negative feelings of this phobia, which may set off some old traumatic events. A lot of people have more likelihood to have these intense fear responses or phobic responses if they've had some kind of trauma in their past, physical, mental, emotional, uh, any kind of trauma. But it's been, what we're trying to do is update your information. We're not trying to take away anything. We're just going to update it. At the time, maybe the fear response was good, but when you're in it, let me ask you a question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it when it really like when you were in that either earlier today or yesterday?
Probably a 12 or a 15 because it's very frustrating along with angry and then self-defeating and really negative.
All right. So it's okay if we change this.
Yes, thank
So
you.
take a deep breath, and now you know that you have that feeling like you pointed to your chest and your head, but it's off the charts, right? But again, reassure that it's only there to keep you safe, secure, all the things that it should, right? So what I want you to do is just imagine you're fine, right? And imagine walking into a movie theater. People know me, know I usually use the Harry Potter approach of the Ministry of Magic. So you're walking into a magical place and there's a movie theater. And in this movie theater is a custom seat for you. So you have a seat and you look up on the screen. Okay? And what I want you to do is you realize that you see yourself as you are today. Right? Getting ready to jump on a call, doing the things you're doing, everything's fine. Right? So as you're doing that, you can see the screen. And now drift up out of yourself and go back to the projection booth. So you can see yourself sitting there looking at the screen. Interestingly, you can't see the screen, you only see yourself looking at the screen. So it's far away, you're safe and secure. Now watch and listen from the projection booth as that you down there sees a black and white movie of going through that phobic response. Like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm trying to build this funnel. It's too confusing. I can't do it. And then how you see yourself up on the screen, freak out, doubt yourself, start using negative words in your head. And it goes all the way through. It didn't kill you. You made it through. You had to probably stopped you from even trying anymore. And now what I want you to do is it freezes at that end point where everything, you got through it. You probably had to take a break or go do something. And now leave the projection booth and slip back into the present you sitting in the movie theater. And then take a deep breath, hold it for a few seconds, and step into the picture on the screen of when it was over. And then run it backwards and in color. And see, hear, and feel everything. So it goes like when you the old days and you run a VCR backwards, right? And so you see that, and it's running backwards. And you hear, like I would say, circus music, do 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 do, all the way back to the beginning. And now what I'd like you to do is come back out, sit in the movie theater, look up there again, and see another time where you kind of freaked out about technology, creating a web page, working on a web. Go back to some of the fiascos with the web pages, and watch the whole thing through. It was a terrible experience, but it didn't kill you, right? So you make that through to the end, and then take a deep breath again. Hold it, step into the last frame. You were hurt and angry and everything, but you lived, and then run that movie backwards and in color of the bad experiences about the website. And here, as you run it backwards in color, you hear do 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 do. Okay, and then step back out. Okay. Now let's do one more. Sit in the movie theater, look up on the screen. And if it wasn't one of those two, think about the absolute worst time you had with technology, where you totally freaked out, you totally broke down, cried, you threw things, you got whatever it was. But you made it through. It didn't kill you. I'm not saying it was pleasant, but you made it through. So watch that and then step into that last frame, run it backwards and in color, and your brain automatically now adds do, 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 do. Okay. And now step back out, look up on the screen, and let that fade away. Keep your eyes closed, but let the screen go blank. It doesn't fade away, it just goes blank. And you can answer it easily. And now, when you think about attacking some technology on a scale of 1 to 10, where is it? Just say it out loud.
Getting into it, I'd say a good 6.5.
Okay. Well, come back and now look up on the screen and know that you've lowered it, but let's add something interesting, right? Look up on the screen, but this time I want you to think about some small victories you've had with technology. Um, Creating your Facebook groups, learning Canva, so you do those posts, right? So watch a video up on the screen. Now you're seeing yourself like when you learn how to create a Facebook group, which you didn't know how before. It's kind of frustrating when you first do it. It's like, oh, what about this? What about that? So, but it took a while, but you did it, right? And then you see yourself doing another technology-based thing. Um, Tik, TikTok, Instagram. You learned how to do it. You created the account. You did the things, right? You probably had some glitches along the way, right? And so, and lastly, think about other things technology related that took you a while to get into. And I'll always throw in, including like doing videos without a filter or without, I can't do it till you got to go get all fixed up and do all that. Just do it, right? So it took you a while to overcome all those things. So your brain knows how to change, right? So now sit back, you're in the movie theater chair, and realize what's stopping you maybe from doing this in your business and actually growing your business is when there's this pushback, it's firing off all those things in your head, not good enough, not smart enough, too old, all those things that could go to other traumas you've had in the past. So when you think of that and you mind real quickly, you look up on the screen, you kind of see some of those things we just talked about. But what if those movies fade away and instead you begin to bring up that like creating the Facebook groups, redoing this, your Instagram and your TikTok videos, and all the things that you're in the process of learning. Right? And as you're watching it, you think to yourself how, as soon as you learn something on these kind of things, you kind of got to keep relearning it because they change things, they change the algorithms, they change how things work. So you're constantly updating it and changing it, and that's okay. And it's a process. Just like as you're watching it now, you also think it's like getting in shape. You don't just work out once. You got to do things all the time. Some days it'll be easy, some days it'll be hard. And so, since this happened, it's kind of generated into other areas of your life that may not serve you well anymore. Right? And people do this in business in general, where they've had some setbacks, bankruptcies, businesses fail. We saw it during COVID exponentially. Businesses failed through no fault of the business person, through no fault of one of my favorite restaurants down here closed. How do you run a restaurant when for over 90 days we live in Florida, we were lucky, it's about 90, 120 days, you couldn't go to the restaurant, right? Um, but when I talked to him about that, because I knew the person, he goes, yeah, it happens. I'm going to start another one. He didn't get the negative dialogue. He was able to put it where he needed, right? And another person I knew had the same thing. He had a vitamin shop, like a health food store. I used to go there all the time. And he just expanded. He bought a bunch of other health food shops that were going around, all this others, right? So he put all his money into this and the marketing, and then COVID hit, where people down here in Florida, where I live, people that didn't know how to go to Amazon and buy the stuff, started to go to Amazon and buy the stuff. Right. And he said what broke his heart is people come in, find a product on the shelf, you know, go on their phone, Amazon it, order it, and say thanks, see you later, and then leave. You know, but he talked about it's just business decisions. You make the best decision you can at the moment you can. He couldn't foresee, COVID and everything else, Amazon exploding that much. So anyway, so kind of give yourself that, Miss Michelle. And so now when you think about like building a funnel, redoing your own website, whatever it is, what if it's automatically, the negative is automatically replaced with, it may not be easy, but I can do this. Oh, maybe you take one of my favorite sayings and you say it in your head. Well, that's just the way it is. The only easy day was yesterday. Today is going to be work. But I'll close with this. What if you find while you're doing this and you're seeing the movies or you think about your experiences, how sometimes a little moment of joy, a little like awesome, something cool happened can motivate you through the pain. So you got one thing right. Awesome, right? Because you could think back to the time you did maybe your first video where you didn't have a filter, where you just come from working out, but people liked it because it was real, you know. And you always remind yourself, people that matter don't judge, people that judge don't matter. So take a deep breath. Come on back.
Thank you.
So what happens now to when you think of building your funnel or creating a web?
What happens now? I can do it. I mean, other people have done it ahead of me. There's Bruce. Other people have done it, so I can too. I can too. It
Yeah.
takes a minute, and that's okay. My worst thing that I used to cry over during April of 2020 was Zoom. And Dr. Will taught us how to use Zoom. And he said, well, you're making a class for tomorrow. And Caroline and I stayed up all night making I was crying till 3 in the morning. But I know how to use Zoom. I mean, this was in 2020 when Zoom was new, and now I have a fake background. I can do filters.
Yeah.
I I can do stuff, and it's easy. And now I walk people, and they're like, "I don't know how to do Zoom," and I always think, "Oh, if I can do Zoom," So I have to just push through it, just push through it. And in
Oh,
my head, I'll tell you, when you were talking about the things that were the negative voices, the negative things that had happened that I was upset about in the past and rewriting them, it was like all these things were coming at me. And then the washing, on the car, the windshield wiper went like this and cleared it. And it didn't matter what was coming at me, it
okay.
kept clearing it.
All right. Yeah. Because you got like Diamond Diller there, he's not only gadget boy, he's app boy. He's always telling me, you gotta try this app. You gotta try that. And I can get stuck in, no, this one's working. I'm staying here for a while. I got one that'll uses AI to put except I haven't figured out how to fix one thing. It'll put the text of the video I'm doing, which it makes people watch your video more. That's what the research says, right? According to Diamond Diller, and from what I've read, people watch it more. The only thing I can't is I need to clean up probably how I pronounce, because that's just the way AI is. So when I say go to hortonpsychology.com, it always comes out with a funky spelling, right? So either I have to pronounce it better, or I have to look at like how to train it better. because AI is like our brains. It's how you train it. So, but doing okay. Cool. All right. So let me. Uh, so that is the fast phobia tech, and with business, I've done it with people that, like I said, they've had a setback in business, sometimes through their own fault, but you don't know what you don't know at the time, right? I mean, I'd leveraged a lot of my resources at the time into buying an alcohol and drug treatment center. Uh, so all my liquid resources were there when it was going to open around March, April of 2020, right? So there go, here's your retirement. Here's your, trust me, I wasn't laughing for a while. Um, but I didn't know. No one could have known. And one person did say, well, you should have known. I believe in conspiracy theories, but I don't think anyone outside of, if you believe in those, anyone outside of that group didn't know anything like this was happening, right? So anyway, kind of cool stuff. Let me remove this. So that is, and like I said, other business things, um, like overcoming that, starting a new business. Um, for a while, like I've helped people um, when they transition, like they're retiring, but now they want to start a new business, right? And so they get that phobic response, right? So those are the things I've done for it, and things like that. And so let me stop the recording, and then we can just share. Where the hell's my button?